No, that's fine. They got it. It's on? Good? All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Lighthouse Project, Wednesday night here in Aventura, Florida. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And tonight's nightly sponsor is Anonymous in memory of Mordechai ben Yosef. We also have a nightly dedication in memory of David Lankry, David ben Zohara, and Daniel Kahn, which is Daniel Tuvia ben Yaakov Yakutiel HaKohen. May their neshamot have an aliyah. Amen. Also in memory of Devorah Fega Bat Shmuel and Moshe Levi ben Shoshana. Amen. Also tonight's learning is for the Refuah Shlema of Chana Bat Shani, Yaakov ben Penina, and Menachem Mendel ben Sarah Batya. Amen. Along with a complete Refuah Shlema, speedy recovery for all Klal Yisrael, all those who are in need of a speedy recovery, health, happiness, Parnasah Tova, and all of the above. Tonight we are going to learn one of the most important concepts we have learned all year. Not only are we starting a brand new book, we're starting the book of Deuteronomy, the fifth book of the 5 books of Moses, of our Chumash, but the Zera Shimshon is going to give us a tremendous insight in the way that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, deals with the Jewish people in this book. So before we get into all of the amazing insights and the nitty-gritty, as I'll call it, of the Zera Shimshon, before that we just have to understand how this book differs than the rest. Out of the 5 books of Moses, the first 4 were written by God through Moses. Okay? This book is a little different because Moshe Rabbeinu is actually writing it himself. We will see how he refers to God in many of the instances. Opposed to God being the one who is speaking, Moses says, and God spoke to me. So there, we see right away from the beginning of this book these differences in this book, and it is to show us that this is Moses' version of his own interactions with the Jewish people throughout the time that he was there serving as their leader, but specifically towards the end, by his deathbed. He starts by rebuking the Jewish people. The commentaries tell us that he learns this tactic from Yaakov Avinu, from Jacob, our patriarch. Yaakov Avinu, before he passes away, gathers all of his children and he brings them close and he blesses them, but he rebukes them as well. And for that reason, he learned also that before he passes away, he was going to rebuke the Jewish people. Now, why wait till the end of one's life to rebuke your children? Our sages teach us that a child will be very silent and listen to the last words of their parent right at the end of their life. As a child, even as a grandchild, whenever your parent tells you something, right away you're on the fence. You comment back, you answer back, but at 120, when one's parent is at the last minutes, the last hours of their life, when they come down and they rebuke and they give advice, at that moment, a child is completely silent. Jacob did this to his children, and Moses is doing it to Bnei Israel. He was their leader, he was their father, he did this as well. If we look at the first verse, anyone who has a Chumash, we are right at the beginning of the Torah portion. We are on page 983, and the first verse sounds like a big, and I'm going to say a very interesting word. It looks like a big mishkabobble, okay? The reason for this is because we don't know what's going on in this verse. I'm going to read it to you. I'll translate it to you. And if it were not for our commentary, specifically the Talmud and Rashi's interpretation, we would understand absolutely nothing for this verse. Listen to the verse. Ele hadvarim. These are the words, Asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael, that Moses says to all of Israel, be'ever Yarden, on the east side of the Jordan River. Again, Moshe Rabbeinu never enters the land of Israel. And this is what he says: Bamidbar, in the wilderness, Ba'arava, on the concerning the Arabah. Then Mol Suf, opposite the sea. Ben Paranu ben Tofel, between Paran and Tofel. Vilavan and white. V'chatzerot v'dizahav, in a place called Chatzerot and a place called Dizahav. We have no idea what's going on over here. So our commentaries tell us that Moshe Rabbeinu was rebuking the Jewish people for most of, I won't say all, but most of their shortcomings over the past 40 years during their traveling in the wilderness. And how did he do so? He did so by hinting and saying the place of each of the places that they sinned in. So we have a total of 7 different sins which are mentioned here, 7 different places, and I'm going to quickly give a recap of what Rashi says that each of these places were corresponding to, and how Moses was hinting to their shortcoming and to their sin. We're going to go one by one. The first place is Bamidbar, and this is where the Jewish people, Rashi said, they complained that we should have just died in Egypt. We should have just died at the hands and at the swords of the Egyptian people. That was when they first came out into the wilderness, Bamidbar. The second is Ba'arava, which was by the plains of Moab. That's where, unfortunately, they committed idol worship through the sin of the daughters of Moab who enticed them to worship idols. That's number 2. Number 3 is Molsuf. Molsuf is when they got to the Sea of Reeds, before it split. Again, they complained, you should have just buried us already. There was no point of us coming out to bury ourselves out here in the desert. Number 4, Ben Paran. That was the place of the spies. From the plains of Paran is where they sent the spies into the land of Israel, and then that created slander on the land of Israel, the Jewish people crying eternally, and that was the major decree of Tisha B'Av that we're going to observe this coming week. Number 5, Uben Tofel Velavan, is when they complained about the manna, the wonder bread that Hashem blessed them. Can you imagine? They have perfect food, which is nutritious and could taste like anything you want, but it's not good enough. They still wanted meat, they wanted zucchini, they wanted watermelon, they wanted fish. They weren't good with what Hashem gave. And Chatzerot, number 6, is where the dispute of Korach took place, and number 7, Di Zahav, is alluding to Zahav, the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf. So these 7 are what Moses is hinting and rebuking the Jewish people. So let's just ask this obvious question. The Re'em, one of the commentaries on Rashi, asks, he says, why is he going at such a cryptic way to hint to all of the sins? Just say each one at a time. Why did he have to go and hint to the place? We see in a couple verses from now that Moshe actually goes through most of these sins in great detail, not hinting in any way. So why does he need to hint all of them in the first verse, the opening verse of the book of Deuteronomy? Answers the Re'em, and he says, we learn a tremendous lesson from the method that Moshe Rabbeinu rebukes the Jewish people. He said that when you need to come down on someone, you need to correct them, the proper way to do it is to start off by hinting to it. We spoke about this once, of when you have a child, and you know that your child is either took something that doesn't belong to them, or is lying, or is ignoring you, not to put them at point blank and say, I caught you, or to say, you took it, you didn't tell me the truth. Because what you're in essence doing is you're putting up that child, and this works for children, this works for your spouse, this works for anybody. When you put someone up against the wall and they have no place to move, then they act in certain ways which are unnatural and not healthy for themselves and for yourself and for your relationship. This is, as we've spoken about a couple months ago, the reason why the Torah says when you go out to war, never ambush your opponent on all ends. Because when they're going to feel desperate and they're going to have nowhere to turn to, they're going to find from within extra courage, and through rage, through strength, through luck, call it what you want, they will overcome. And we've seen this in both sides. We've seen when the Jewish people have been surrounded on all sides. Take the Maccabees for an example in the time of Chanukah. They found they were the less, the weaker. They had all odds against them. They didn't have elephant warfare and all this artillery that they had. No, they were the underdogs, yet they still came out. So too in life, don't put a person up. When you're going to criticize someone, don't come down too hard on them, at least at the beginning. Rather, hint to a couple different things they did wrong by a place, just so that if they're smart enough, they pick up on it, they correct their ways, and if not, then you'll sit them down and one by one go through it. However, this is exactly how Moshe Rabbeinu went on to do it. He listed all of the places that they sinned at, but only in a hinting manner. Having said that, we're going to move to verse 23. And I'm going to quote to you the verse. The verse is in chapter 1, verse 23.
What's the Parashat?
Parashat Devarim. Yeah. In that book, you're going to be on page 492. Okay. This part of this Torah portion, is speaking specifically about the sin of the Jewish people sending the spies, which we had a couple weeks ago in Parashat Shelach. We spoke about it at great length. However, tonight the Zera Shimshon is going to give us a new insight to the episode that took place. And I'm going to read a couple of verses. The verse says, we came close to the land of Israel, and then you come upon me and requested to send in spies. And we sent them in. They came out. They had a report. You guys weren't happy. You cried about it. And we were doomed for so. Listen to this verse. Verse 23. It says, Vayitav be'enai hadavar. Moshe Rabbeinu says, and when you came to me and you gave me the idea, okay, let's send the Jewish people, let's send spies into the land of Israel to spy out the land. Here Moses is saying, it was good in my eyes. I was happy with it. We went along with it. Vayikach mikem shenem asar anashim. And I took from you 12 people, one from each tribe, ish echad lashavet, in order to send them in to the land of Israel. Vayifnu vayalu ahara. They go in, they climb up the mountain, they come to Nachal Eshkol, and they spy, they espionage the land of Israel. They take with them big fruits, they come back with it, and then they give the bad review of the land of Israel. Can we close that door, please? Thank you. Comes Rashi, and Rashi asks an obvious question. When the Torah says, Vayitav be'enai, when Moshe is saying that it was good in my eyes, what does that mean it was good in his eyes? Did Moshe really want to send the spies into the land of Israel? Answer's no. He did not. Do you know what that means? Imagine I come and I tell you, I'm bringing you a gift from the king. Oh, let me look at it. Let me peek at it first so I'll know how to react to the king when I see it. Let me see if it's really worth sticking around for. He's only going to present it to me at midnight. Is it worth staying up for? I bring to you a gift from God. Do you need to take a peek? Do you need to have a spy go out and say, let's see if this is worth it? Let's see if this is good? That's disrespectful. But Moses saying, and it was good in my eyes. Rashi explains how. Rashi explains that the Jewish people come to him and he doesn't know what to do. He looks to God and God says, listen, I don't suggest it, but they're your people, you got to answer up to them. You have to do whatever they say at the end of the day. So you know what Moshe does? He tries using a technique. The technique he uses, as Rashi explains, is he says, imagine, well, he doesn't say this is how Rashi interprets it. Imagine you come to me and you want to buy, Rashi says, my donkey. And you want to know what type of performance this donkey can give you. So you ask me, how's a donkey when it carries heavy loads? I say, it's amazing. You've never seen a donkey that carries so heavy. How does this donkey work when it needs to go long distance? It goes long distance. You got the best donkey. It's worth every penny. How's this donkey when it needs to speed up and it needs to outrun some burglars or some thieves? Best donkey, you got it all. What about when it needs to go uphill and it's carrying a heavy load and you're on its back? Best donkey, you can't find a better donkey. So what's someone, the buyer, going to do when he sees such a confident seller? One of two things. He's either going to call him on his bluff and say, well, I want to try all of that. Or he's going to really trust the seller. Because a seller which is so confident and is not only saying it can do all that, I'm telling you, go try my donkey, try to outrun some burglars, try to put a heavy load on it, try to climb it up. You see my confidence in it, and you're like, okay, he's either a good salesman or it's the truth. Most people, as long as the person is trustworthy, are going to go with it and say it's the truth. That's what Moshe was trying to do. Moshe was trying to do is he was saying, it's an amazing land. You want to go spy it out? Go for it. Go spy it. Go check it. What did the Jews do? They took him up on his word, opposed to saying, you know what? If Moshe is so confident that this land of God is so perfect, let's go along with him. No! Now that still doesn't really answer. That's what Rashi says. Rashi says he tried to use a reverse psychology technique on the Jewish people and it failed. So how was that good in his eyes? How was he happy? Did Moshe gain anything from allowing the Jewish people to enter the land, to the spies to enter? I don't think so. The Zera Shimshon says, wait and see. In truth, that Moshe Rabbeinu did gain something tremendous by allowing the Jewish people by agreeing to allow the Jewish people to send in the spies to the land of Israel, and this is why it was Vayitav be'enai, it was good in his eyes. The Zera Shimshon says, there's a halacha, the Shulchan Aruch brings it down, that whatever the common folk, whatever the population agreed to is considered a norm, is established as a norm. And whatever the common population and the census is that this is abnormal, that's now rendered as something which is abnormal. And this has to do with laws of purchases and sale. If someone is coming over and they're buying an item from you, and the item is in a condition which is norm, or the terms are a norm of that purchase and that sale is now binding. However, if something abnormal was brought up, part of the sale or the purchase, that sale is now considered null and void. Okay, what does this have to do over here? Listen to this. If we go back to Parashat Shlach Lecha, the Torah portion, a couple weeks ago, of when the Jewish people came with this idea of the spies. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the spies, go and see the land, and he told them three very specific things. He said, go see how good or how bad the land is. Number two, go see how strong or weak the nation that's occupying that land are. And number three, see if those people are numerous or few in number. Comes the commentaries, the Zera Shimshon asks, why was he being so specific? Just send them and say, go and give me a report. The Zera Shimshon says, you know what the Jewish people agreed on with Moshe before going in? They set the standards of what is considered the norm of a good land and what would be considered abnormal. What would be considered a valid transaction with God's gift, as if we need to validate that transaction. What would be a valid transaction and valid standard of what's good in the land opposed to what's no good? That's what Moshe set up with them before they entered in. He set up that if the land is good, looks good to work, okay, very good. If the people are strong or weak, that will also depend on it. And if the people are so numerous or few, those are the three factors that the Jewish people, along with Moshe, came to a conclusion. But Moshe was even happier. You know why he was so happy? Because they went back, the people who came to suggest the spies, and they discussed amongst themselves. They came to a unified. Can you imagine so many Jews coming to the same conclusion and agreeing on something? They agree to what the norm and the standards are. They come back to Moshe and they all agree on these three. So Moshe was thrilled. On one hand, he wished that the Jewish people would have never came and wanted to send spies in. But on the other hand, now that they agreed what the standard is, he was confident that these three things is not an issue. Where did the problem start? Is when the Jewish people broke their end of the deal, the Zera Shimshon says. He says that when the Jewish people came back, they started bringing all different types of factors into their report, as if you study Parashat Shlach Lecha, the Torah portion of Shlach Lecha, in depth, at first they don't really say anything wrong. However, when they see how enthusiastic the two positive of the spies were, then they come back and then they, Kalev and Yoshua, then they come back and then they come and then they bring their negativity. That negativity was a breach in the rules and in the standards that they set as a population of what the norm of an accepted, validated transaction and gift or standard for the Jewish people was set to be. That's where they messed up. Zera Shimshon brings two examples. He says, firstly, that when they came back and they started reporting about the fruits, the size of the fruits. Where does that come in? We said, is the land good? Big fruits means the land's good. We said, are the people strong or weak? We said, are they numerous or not? What are they coming back? And they're saying in a derogatory manner, look at these massive fruits. They were trying to convince the rest of the Jewish people that they're too strong for us to overcome. But they were using it, they were presenting it in a tactic which was not fair based on the rules and the norm that they set before entering in. Another example he gives. He comes and he says that the Jewish people came, they agreed beforehand that if there are, one second, they came back and they said that that the people of the land of Canaan were living in fortified cities. Before they left, they agreed that if they lived in fortified cities, it means they're weak. It means they're not strong enough and courageous enough to take on an enemy. Rather, they would need a fortified city. They came back and they started complaining that they're full of fortified cities, alluding to that they were strong. Again, manipulating the rules and manipulating the standard that they set before entering in. For those reasons, the Zera Shimshon says Moshe Rabbeinu was actually happy that they agreed on sending in the spies on these conditions. Where everything went sour, unfortunately, was the fact that the Jewish people, broke the rules. And as much as the saying goes, rules are made to be broken, in this situation and in most situations, that is not true. When there are certain rules in place, and especially for such an agreement, imagine two people, they're engaging in a contract, and one of them breaches the contract and just continues proceeding it on their own terms. That is not something which is going to hold up. It's not something which is proper. This is what happened between the Jewish people and Moshe Rabbeinu. And this is what led them to their doom. If they would have played by the rules that they agreed on, it wasn't rules that they signed on it already. This is what led to them. Now, moving on to a couple verses later. This is in chapter 1, verse 34. The Torah tells us how Moshe recounts to the punishment God gives the Jewish people for them breaking their rules. He says as follows, Vaishma Hashem hears, God hears, et kol divrechem, He hears the voice of your words, vaiktsof vaishava lemor, and God gets angry and He swears the following. Look what He swears. If any of these people of this wicked nation, alluding to the Jews unfortunately, I swear, God is saying, that none of these Jews are going to see the land of Israel. Not one of them is going to enter, and that's the next two verses. Zulati, except for Kalev ben Yefuneh and Yoshua bin Nun. The two that already saw the land, the two that gave a positive report, the two that stood up to the peer pressure of the rest of the nation, those are the only two that are going to enter in. God takes a vow. He promises this. Now, listen to a very interesting question the Zera Shimshon asks. He says, why did the verse have to say, Vaishma Hashem et kol divrechem, the voice of their words? Or the sound of their words. Couldn't the verse have said, Vaishma Hashem et divrechem, Hashem heard their words? Why is Moses saying that God heard and swore based on the fact that he heard the voice or the sound of their words? The word kol, seems to be superfluous in this verse, and this is where a tremendous lesson is going to be taught to us. The Zera Shimshon turns to the book of Iyov, which is, by the way, one of the few pieces of Torah that we're allowed to learn on the day of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is a sad day. It's a day of mourning. It's a day where we fulfill all of the traditions that we fulfill, unfortunately, when a person is mourning a family member that passed on. And learning Torah is one of the prohibitions that one is not allowed to do when a family member, we're talking an immediate family member, passes on. So too on Tisha B'Av. Why? This brings us back to last week. What's a guarantee? What's a promise for someone who learns Torah? Is joy, simcha. No one is allowed. We're not allowed to have simcha on the very sad day of Tisha B'Av. So therefore, the only things we're allowed to learn, Torah always brings happiness and joy, right? The only Torah we're allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av is things which are sad, to the point where A person who learns Chok L'Yisrael every day cannot learn on Tisha B'Av Chok L'Yisrael. A person who learns Daf Yomi cannot. A person who reads Tehillim, you can't even read your daily Tehillim on Tisha B'Av. Just the prayers, and then anything which does not promote any happiness, such as there are certain parts in the Talmud which speak about the laws of mourning or the story of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, as it is in Masechet Gitin. Most of the volume of Moed Katan, which speaks about the laws of mourning. Any other sad parts of Jewish history? Iyov is one of the books that one is allowed to read. And for this, the Zera Shimshon turns to chapter 32 and 33 and 34 to the book of Iyov, and learns an amazing lesson from the word kol. Now, just to give a little prelude of who Iyov was, the Talmud has different opinions of who Iyov was. Was he Jewish? Was he not even Jewish? Was he righteous? Was he not righteous? To make a long story short, because it's a long story, okay? But to make a long story short, Iyov was looked down upon by the Satan. And the Satan looks down at him and he, kivyachol, as if, he goes over, "Hey Hashem, let's see how great your creations are." Hashem said, "I have Iyov. Iyov is a great, great, great tzaddik, righteous person. There's nothing you can do that can make him veer off his path of righteousness." Really? God, do we have a pact? Are we betting on it? Go for it. And so it was. And Iyov had amongst the hardest trials and tribulations and suffering to, unfortunately, he had to bury all of his children. He lost all his wealth. He had to wander. He really, really suffered. Now, Iyov had a friend. His friend was Elihu. And Elihu rebukes Iyov and tries to, because Iyov was like, he was beaten at the end. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the Satan did beat him to cave in. And Elihu, his good friend, came to him and was rebuking him, "Don't cave in. Take it all from Hashem." I want to go through with you, before we bring this answer, the 4 different points, and we can expand on each of these points very long, but we're not going to. But he goes through 4 different themes and points which he was giving a strong message to Iyov. The first was the theme of pain and suffering. Understanding, this is in chapter 33 of the book of Iyov, it's something that we welcome everybody to learn on Tisha B'Av, is the pain and suffering that a person has and is inflicted upon them. When a person understands it's coming from Hashem, it's much easier to cope with. It's much easier to understand that there's a point to that pain and suffering, right? There's certain pain and suffering where you ask yourself, what's the point? What's the gain? And others are much easier to understand, much easier to see how and where the light of the end of the tunnel is. That's the first. The second theme that he brings is that God's way is just. Everything Hashem presents to us and He puts us down that path, it always is for a specific reason, and it's more often than not above our realm of understanding why He does what He does. The third is the theme of God is vis-a-vis man. That the way we act is the way God acts back towards us. And the fourth theme is the methodology of divine discipline, which he goes to at great length and comes down on Iyov and really, really telling him, stay strong, don't give in, not now. Having said that, before Elihu comes to Iyov to give him these rebukes, the verse says something, very interesting. The verse is in chapter 32, verse 18. Listen to the words. Ki maleti milim, I am full of words. Elihu tells Iyov, I'm full of words. Hetzikatni ruach bitni, and the spirit inside my belly distresses me. It's That's a very weird way to start a conversation, especially when you're going to rebuke someone. So, this explains the Zera Shimshon. Sometimes, and this is a life lesson, sometimes a person has something bottled up inside them. They have something on their mind, they have something on their heart, and they come to, as we say, verbally vomit on you. There's no, the mitzvah, the Zera Shimshon says, there's no mitzvah to stand there and take the heat. Just because someone else has an issue with themselves or with someone else, you don't need to stand there and get vomited all over. No, you don't have to. Now, does it mean that you're going to have to stand there and hear it? Maybe, but do you need to internalize what that person is saying? No. So that's two things. Number one is, sometimes you're going to have to stand there and listen to it, because it could be someone you can't avoid. It could be a family member, it could be your boss, it could be your spouse. How many times do you need to sit down there and your spouse is vomiting on you, and you just got to go, yeah, did that ever happen to you? No? Okay, fine. It happens! How many times do your parents come down on you and you just have to... How many times does your employer come down on you and it wasn't even you who did it? But sometimes you just have to take it, but not internalize it. People say very nasty things when they have something on their mind. You know, you committed a crime this big and they turned it into this. And now what, you need to think that you're this bad? Or that you faulted this much? No! This is the words of the Zera Shimshon. I'm not even adding into his words. He actually says all this. He says sometimes someone has something on their mind or on their heart, and you don't need to take it to heart. Just because it's on their heart, it's on their mind, you don't need to take it to heart. But there is a time where you do need to take to heart what someone is telling you, even when it hurts, even when it pierces through. And this we learn of the follow-up of Elihu to Iyov. Listen to what he says. In chapter 34, verse 16, he says, Ha'azina, listen up, lekol mili, to the voice of my words. Same question as our verse over here in Devarim. Lekol divrechem, lekol mili. What does that mean? The voice of the words. Anybody?
Intention.
Oh, very good. Very good. Very good. And these are things we're going to speak about. The Zera Shimshon says, and he explains, you know what Elihu was coming and telling Iyov? Iyov, what I'm going to tell you now is going to hurt. And what I'm going to tell you might look or sound malicious or even as if I'm angry at you for failing. However, pay attention to my kol. Pay attention to my voice. Pay attention to the underlying intonation of the words that are coming out of my mouth. And realize that I'm only saying it for your own good. There's no malaise over here. There's no bad intention. I'm not here to put you down. You want to know the proof? Listen to the tone of my voice. Listen to the way I'm saying it to you. And Iyov, I guess, accepted it as much as he could. From those words, we can put it back right on to our verse. The Jewish people, listen to how genius Zera Shimshon says this, and then I have 4 practical lessons to pull out from this. Okay? We're going to go through all of them. The Zera Shimshon brings, and he says, the Jewish people could have had a claim. You know what their claim could have been? You know why we cried? You know why we were screaming and we were sad? And why you might want to feel like you need to punish us for not entering the land? Because we were scared. When they came back with a harsh report, they scared us. Our emotions were manipulated with. And therefore, Hashem, don't punish us so hard. Comes Moshe Rabbeinu on behalf of God and says, you cannot make that claim. Because when you said what you said, when you cried, when you were scared to enter the land, you were level-headed. Hashem paid attention to the kol of your divrechem, to the voice, to the meaning and the intention you had in those words, and they were now bound. They were now irreversible. It's very insulting out of rage to insult somebody. It's very, very bad. However, it's much easier to come back afterwards, as Shimshon says, and apologize for acting the way you acted when you were angry, when you were not level-headed. Right? When we're angry, blood rushes to our head, and it's almost like you're dizzy. It's like you just had a cup of wine almost. You feel all worked up when you're angry. And the Zera Shimshon says, when a person is worked up and they're emotionally charged, you could come back and ask for forgiveness. Because the person's going to say, okay, so you had a tough day, you had a hard time, someone stepped on your toe, you got into a car accident, I said something to tick you off, so fine, I'll forgive you for that. But a person who's calm and collected, and they look you straight in the eyes, and they say something which is insulting yet true, how do you forgive that person? It's very hard. They said it to you, eye to eye, they were not angry, they didn't scream, they didn't raise their voice, they looked at you and they pierced through your heart something true when they were level-headed and equal-minded, as we say. That's why Hashem couldn't forgive them, the Zera Shimshon says, for the sin of the spies. Sending the spies in, 1x, that was no good. Them going and them coming back with a report, another X. They could have survived. The Jewish people crying and being angry for it and scared, Hashem could have even looked at that. But the fact that they reacted and they spoke when they were level-headed and they were no longer emotionally charged, that's when Hashem sealed and swore the only two which are entering this land, not even you, Moshe, and not even Aharon, and not Miriam, was only going to be Yoshua and Kalev. Listen to the lessons that we can learn from this chidush and apply them. And these are not mine, these are from the Zera Shimshon. Listen to how amazing this is. First, what we learned about is how to rebuke somebody. When you need to rebuke someone, when you need to criticize, correct, there's a way to do it. The way to do it is to start off by easing the person into the conversation. The modern books, and I'll quote one of my personal favorite, Dale Carnegie, he writes that you should always compliment somebody and be quick to compliment before you criticize. That's his rule. His rule is be quick to compliment before you criticize. And his rule is never to criticize. But if you have to, you shower it, you bundle it up with compliments and praises before and after. What we learned this evening complements that when you do need to correct somebody, try hinting it to them. Try not putting them at point blank, because it's very hard for them to save face if you do that. And we learned that from Moshe Rabbeinu. We learned that from the way that he started off by just giving an overview of all of the different sins. Later on, you get into the detail for each one, because sometimes if they don't get the hint, well, then you gotta spell it out for them. But try first by hinting. Be quick to compliment and scarce to criticize or to correct. On a side note, the only person that you can correct or change, as we always speak about, is yourself. Not your spouse, not your friends, not your kids, not your grandchildren. There's nobody in the world you can change except yourself. That's lesson number one. Included in lesson number one, is it's not what you say, it's the way you say it. And this is so important when rebuking someone or correcting someone. They really need help and you genuinely want to help them. How are you going to get that message across? How are you going to say it? How are you going to verbalize it? How are you going to construct that sentence? It means a lot. How's your facial expression going to be? All these things mean a lot. If you really care for that person, hocheach tochiach et amitecha, the Torah says. Rebuke, O rebuke your fellow. There's many, many explanations to why is there double terminology. One explanation is be very careful before you do it. Make sure you do it and it's going to count. There's no mitzvah. It's actually an avera. It's a prohibition to go over and rebuke someone when you know they're not going to change. All the more so if you know they're going to push them further away. If you want someone to change, genuinely you care for them, it's all in the way how you say it. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. This is lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is on the receiving end. And we have to be strong and confident to know when to accept criticism from others and not. This is not a concept of being arrogant. This is a concept of survival. If everyone's always coming down on you and you're coming down on yourself, well, you're going to have no self-esteem. You're going to have no confidence. And therefore, the Zera Shimshon is giving us an indicator. How to know when to take the criticism or the bashing that someone comes and administers to you. You take it when they're coming and they're speaking to you level-headed. When they're speaking to you not out of range, not out of anger. Unfortunately, siblings to one another, spouses to one another, good friends to one another, in an argument, in the heat of the argument, say things that they would love to revert, that they are so sorry they ever said that. Know on the receiving end to not take it so strong, although it was the truth. Although, and that's, by the way, that's the only things that do hurt. The only insults that hurt are ones that are true. But no, don't come down so hard on yourself if they said it when they were emotionally charged. If they said it in a way where it was out of anger, it was out of rage, it was out of spite, it was out of revenge, don't take it too hard on yourself. That's the second lesson. The third lesson is a lesson in communication. And when I say this rule, you are going to jog back in your mind, whether it's to earlier today or to any time previously, how true this is. When someone is arguing or proving a point, and they are rock solid and strong on that point, they could say it to you as quiet and as calm as this. They could say it without moving their hands or any facial expression because they are completely confident in their argument and what they're saying in that point. However, when someone is not fully confident or someone is not able to impress their ideology or their philosophy or their argument onto someone else, you know what they do? They start raising their voice. They start animating the way they speak. They start using colorful language just to get your attention. They start swearing and using derogatory words only to get your attention and only to impress their ideology onto you. This could be used for the good. It could be used for the bad. If I would sit here tonight like this and I would speak monotone, there wouldn't be anyone sitting here. And everyone would have left or fell asleep by now. So the skill in animating the way you speak is something very important, yet also as a receiver. I'm giving you one of my tools, okay? That's giving you a secret, okay? Whenever someone speaks to you and they are emotionally charging that conversation, and I'm going to do both sides. Let's use the negative first. If someone is really screaming, raising their voice, using derogatory terminologies, know that they are doing that to trick you into what they're trying to make you believe. Don't fall for it. Don't fall too quick for it. Okay? If you have something on someone or in a certain situation and you're rock solid and you have all your proofs and you cross-proofed it and it's referenced out, just saying it is literally like dropping a bomb. Right? If you can't drop a powerful bomb, you're going to create a bomb with your words, or better yet, with your voice. Okay? Now let's use the flip side. Very often, you might hear a very, very inspirational speaker, a gifted individual who knows how to public speak. You will one day, or if you haven't already, meet an amazing salesman. And based on their body language, their vocabulary, their appearance, and the product they're trying to stick you with, you might fall for it. Take a step back. Is this a show? Are they trying to sell me something? Or is this genuine? And the same comes in anything. Someone's trying to sell you, to convince you, to teach you. Are they over animating what they're trying to do? Or are they being genuine about it? And this is the power of the voice, power of the volume, power of your vocal variety that you use and that others use towards you. And that's the third lesson. We're going to review them right before we end. The fourth lesson is the following. And this is a lesson in accountability. And this is the true lesson that Zera Shimshon is teaching us from Bnei Israel. That we have to be very careful. We have to remind ourselves that there's almost no turning back when you say something and you're level-headed. We have to remember that when we say something, and we're going to, again, if you can't control it, and you have it on top of your head, you have it on your heart, you need to verbally vomit on someone else, it's horrible, it's bad, but hopefully you'll be able to make up with the person because everyone was really charged and emotionally charged, and angry, and rage, and jealousy, and all of those. However, when you're level-headed, imagine you're out to coffee with someone. You're at a restaurant. You're trying to keep a certain decorum. No one's raising their voice, although that not always happens, okay? And you're going at it between the two of you. Could be you and your sister, it could be you and your brother, you and your spouse, you and a parent, you and a childhood friend. And let's say the conversation is level-headed. It's after the trauma. You're trying to work things out. Be very careful what you say in those cases, in that instant. Because when you are level-headed and you say something that hurts, that's going to be held up against you forevermore. It's a concept of accountability. It's a concept of being careful what you say. Anything you have not said, we've learned this in the Chok L'Yisrael before. Anything you have not said, the words you have not said, you own. Anything that you have said and it's already exited your mouth, you have no ownership over, you can't control it. And this is all the more so true in the rule of accountability when you are level-headed and you're clear in your thoughts and you say things which hurt others. So I'm going to review the 4 lessons, and this last one of accountability is the primary lesson we learn from the Jewish people. They condemned themselves to never entering the land of Israel because of how calm and how collected and how conscious they were when they complained about the land of Israel after the report of the spies. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu was coming and saying, Vayishma Hashem et kol divrechem. He didn't only hear the words you were saying, he heard the voice. He heard your intuition. He heard what you were alluding to, what you really meant based on the tone of your voice, based on the intention of the way you articulated this complaint. And that was going against God. That was a tremendous insult to God. So to review the 4 lessons, lesson number 1 was the proper way to rebuke or to criticize or to correct someone. Doing it in a hinting manner and doing it very, very carefully. Being very, very cautious and sensitive to the words you are using. Again, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. That's number 1. Number 2 is knowing as a listener to not always internalize the verbal vomit which is being thrown your way. You don't need to internalize all that, especially when it's emotionally charged. That was number 2. Number 3 is a lesson in communication. Be aware of the way people are communicating to you and the way you communicate to others. Because when all these other types of what's the word I'm looking for? Forces and components, all these other components of volume and vocal variety and animation, all of that is just a cover-up and just trying to weigh in on a weaker argument or point. And the 4th lesson was a lesson in accountability, being very, very careful when you are level-headed and when you are clear in mind not to say something you'll regret And vice versa, when someone tells you something, when they are level-headed and mindful, just like Elihu told to Iyov, take it because it's really coming your way. Now, that's when you need to heed to those corrections and that criticism. May the merit of the Zera Shimshon bless us to internalize these concepts and put them into action. I want to end off with a story that is brought in the English version of the Zera Shimshon. This is a story which is meaningful to me for who it happened to. And I'll tell you. When I was in yeshiva in Mikdash Melech in Jerusalem, this was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. This was 12 years ago. There was a very, very fiery rabbi speaking about dramatizing the Torah. He did it, but for the good. He really put the fear of God in you. He was amazing. Okay? You're going to hear. And the first time I saw this rabbi, I said, this guy's off his rocker. Again, I wasn't coming from yeshiva. I was coming from a co-ed Jewish day school, high school. Like, what? So I'm introduced to yeshiva, and now I'm introduced to fire and brimstone. This guy literally in the Bet Midrash was yelling his head off. Mind you, he was almost a full head taller than me, and he wasn't a stick. He wasn't overweight, but he was a massive guy. And he had as if he had a microphone in his mouth. Tremendous. So the first week I thought, this guy is off his rocker. The next week I skipped the class. The third week I skipped the class. The fourth week I was forced to go to the class, and ever since then I went every single week. It was amazing. And he had this good Brooklyn accent. And we enjoyed. He really, really educated us, and he formed us as bachers in yeshiva. He unfortunately, a couple years ago, I think this was 6 years ago, in a ridiculous manner, it only had to be Hashem's hand. There was a snowstorm in Jerusalem. I was living there, I was in Kollel, and he slipped on black ice, and he passed away. It was it just didn't make sense. Mind you, he himself was he was a Rosh Yeshiva of another yeshiva, and he used to come once a week to our yeshiva to give us a Musar Shmuz, to really, really pump us up for the week. And when I heard that, I was so sad, and everyone was asking, how could Hashem do this? And these are calculations. It's like many decades before, Rabbi Pincus, who I often quote, passed away in a tragedy, a horrible car accident with him, his wife, and his daughter. How could he? He wasn't so old. Neither was Rabbi Rubenstein. So we don't have those calculations. Hashem understands. Hashem knows. He's got a calculation, and sometimes the only thing which is consoling to say is sometimes Hashem has to recall his angels and bring them back to him. It was really, really hard for everyone to understand and to grasp. And like all great people who pass away, the week of Shiva is full of people coming over and telling stories about the deceased to the family members of how great the person was. Listen to the following story. And this story resonates so much with this concept because we're speaking about voice, kol, the way the rabbi spoke, and standing up to accountability and being level-headed. Like, he really encompassed all of these life lessons and these rules. Listen to a brief story. I'll make it short. There's a new kollel that opened up in Jerusalem. This was before he passed away. For the selected few, the gifted of all avrechim, all rabbis who are studying to become proper rabbis. And it was led by, and it is led by still, a very, very prominent rabbi in Israel who travels all over to teach, but he dedicated his time also to this kollel. This kollel was also a kollel which paid more to the rabbi's learning than other kollels, and because of that, it's a very vigorous and intense program. Because of that, they had a rule that all cell phones cannot be silenced. They have to be completely powered off in the Bet Midrash when they're learning. From 9 to 1, through and through, the phone is off. From, I believe it's 3 to 7, the phone is off. through and through. There was an emergency phone that if any of the wives need to reach any of their husbands, that's how they called. But all the cell phones had to be off. Very good. Once a week, Rabbi Rubenstein, alav shalom, he was very close with the Rosh Yeshiva, the Rosh Kollel of this Kollel. And he would come once a week when the Rosh Kollel would give his talk of the week to all of the gentlemen. He sits down, they sit, they go, and the unimaginable happened. A phone rings in the middle of the class. The rabbi teaching ignored it. 2 minutes later, the phone rings again. And it's not an emergency phone. This was in someone's pocket. The rabbi paused. He gave literally the stare of death. And he continued. And the unimaginable, the unthinkable, the unfathomable happens again. And the phone rings again. The rabbi stops. Almost in anger, again, because there's a certain reason why he wants that. I think we can all agree that when your phone's off, you can concentrate, and when it's on, you can't. So the rabbi shuts the book, and he, on the spot, fires all of the rabbis in that kollel. He says, "Are you gentlemen making a mockery out of this? You know the rule. You know that's why I pay you so much. And you don't need to give me an accounting. You need to give an accounting to all of the supporters of this kollel, because I fundraise from them on condition that they know that their money is being well spent to full hours of learning. No doodling on the phone." And the phone's ringing in the middle of the class? Pack up your stuff, go home. Pretty serious.
Why fire everyone?
Because no one admitted to it. No one said anything. It's a good question.
But if it's not yours, you have nothing to admit to.
Oh, I'm going to bring you a bad rule. Okay, we learned this from the Three Musketeers. It's one for all and all for one. Right? So listen to this. The rabbi gets up and he's about to walk out, and Rabbi Rubenstein, who was sitting right there, he says, "Rabbi, don't be so harsh on the students. It was my phone. I'm sorry. I really never... I also hold the same policy, and I always turn off my phone when I enter the study hall, and I forgot to. Please have mercy on them." The rabbi sat down and continued to teach. Lo and behold, and we're talking not one of these students flinched when the phone rang. Okay? Lo and behold, one of these students comes to the shiva, the morning session of Rabbi Rubenstein, comes and tells the parents, so not the parents, the children and the wife of Rabbi Rubenstein, "I walked out of that session thinking, I can't believe the rabbi had his phone on, and it rang 3 times. He walks outside the building, he pulls out his phone to power it on, and he saw his phone was on. And he realized that it was he who forgot to power off his phone and innocently didn't even know it was ringing. And at that moment, he checked his log and he saw he had 3 missed calls from his wife then. Was it an emergency? Don't worry. And he told the family, I cannot believe that Rabbi Rubenstein took the bullet for all of us. Do you know how embarrassing it is? You're not just another guy. You're a rabbi. You're a close friend of the one teaching. And he took the bullet, and the voice of the phone, that ringing, he got up and he boldly took the bullet for everyone else, knowing that it wasn't his phone. And in life we learn from this story only came about, he never even told anyone about this story. This story only was revealed afterwards, after he passed away. It's an amazing, amazing concept. To know what it means to be accountable, to know what it means to care for another, to know what it means when to speak, when not to speak, and there's almost no words that we can express of how manly, how courageous, what a true leader Rabbi Asher Zelig Rubenstein, alav shalom, did for all of those gentlemen over there. So may we all learn from him, learn from the words of the Zera Shimshon, to know when to speak, how to speak, and always be great communicators to our spouses, to our children, to our friends, to our co-workers, and to all B'ezrat Hashem. Amen v'amen. Thank you everyone for coming.
Let me turn my